الآن يمكنكم المشاركة في مبادرة الأيام الرقمية تحت شعار انطلق بقوة مع جوجل، والتي يتناول فيها خبراء جوجل عناوين جديدة أسبوعيا مثل السحابيات، مهارات من جوجل، أندرويد، فلتر، ذكاء الآلة، فايربيس، ديزاين ثينكينج، مقسمة إلى دورات وورشات عمل يومية بالإضافة إلى مسابقات أسبوعية. شاهد الأيام الرقمية مباشرة على اليوتيوب وشارك رأيك وأسئلتك مع خبراء جوجل، واحصل على شهادة حضور في كل محاضرة تشترك فيها. هذا وأكثر من الأحد إلى الخميس ابتداء من الساعة 9 بتوقيت دبي عبر الرابط المبين youtube.com/gdgmina.
Assalamu alaikum. Hello everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are. So my name is Wafa Waheeda, and I'm here to talk about everything that you need to know while communicating with a backend service, especially when you're building an Angular app. So the title is all about communicating with a backend service in Angular. So a little about me is that I'm from Qatar, and I'm a software engineer here. I'm a software engineer with about like 3+ years of experience, and but I've been doing front end whole my life. I was introduced to programming when I was in grade 6, and I picked up an interest for web design, and I'm really passionate about web and anything that deals with user experience. So that's how like I really enjoy the front end side of things more. So I'm really glad to be here, and I'm really excited to share what I know about backend services and how you can implement communicate with them in using Angular. So if you want to introduce yourself, like I'm looking at the chat, and if you have any questions at any point, please feel free to ask. I'm here active. I'm trying to be active on the chat as well. So yeah, let's get started. So as you know, MENA Digital Days has been going on, and you're all like I'm sure you're all benefiting from it. So stay tuned to the end of the session, and you can also go and get your certificate at this link for this particular live stream. Like the code will be listed towards the end, but you have to go to this URL in order to get your attendance certificate for this talk. All right, let's start. So like I said already, we're going to now learn about how to connect your Angular API with the backend service. And we're going to learn specifically more about APIs and how Angular helps in communication. So as you can see, backend service, backend might be a very general term, but when you call backend as a service, it could be like a load balancer, it could be a database, it could be a lot of things. We are specifically going to talk about APIs today, and we're going to see how Angular communicates with an API. By using an open API on the internet. We're going to be doing some demos, inshallah, some live coding as well if time permits. And we're going to also demonstrate the communication between Angular and APIs, with the help of the demos. So I just said the word open API. Open API is nothing but like a public API. You don't have to write it. So if you're working in a traditional project, you'll be making your own backend. You'll be having your own database, your own API, your own frontend. But for the purpose of this talk is more about how your frontend can communicate with the API. So communicate with the backend using the API. So we're going to see how Angular does that, and that's why we're not going to sit and write an API. So that's why we're just going to see how Angular communicates with an open API that's already public on the internet. So I just wanted to start with a quick Angular recap, and then we'll go through the basics of APIs, some terminology, and inshallah we'll get right into the demos after that. So how does that sound? Are you all on board with it? Great. Okay, so a quick recap on Angular. Angular is something which is built with TypeScript and RxJS. We all know that Angular is a front-end framework, right? But what we also know is that it's built using TypeScript and RxJS. RxJS is reactive JavaScript. So what's that? What's TypeScript? What does TypeScript offer for Angular? TypeScript provides optional static typing, which means, if you're familiar with JavaScript, you'd know that JavaScript is really crazy because, it's asynchronous and you get lost, especially when you're building a front end with it, it gets really, really hectic. And especially with JavaScript, one of the problems of it is that it picks dynamic types. You have like a var, and in the recent versions of JavaScript, you have let, const. You don't really say, int x, int y. You don't have like types, integers, strings. You don't have types in JavaScript. Whereas in TypeScript, which is like a superset of JavaScript, it allows you to have optional static types. That is, you can now have, you can still say let x, and you can add like a type to it. X is an integer. You get to say that with TypeScript. So Angular is a framework, a front-end framework, which is built with TypeScript, and RxJS is baked into it, like reactive JavaScript. So if you wanna know a little bit about RxJS is all about like this new programming paradigm, which is event-driven programming. So it's more about like reactive, how you're gonna react if this happens. So that's more like a quick introduction about TypeScript and RxJS, which Angular is built upon. And basic, also like Angular, if you're just talking about this entire framework, you can summarize it into three things, based on its building blocks. It's built with components, which is like a single piece of a UI, or you define what a component is. It could be, it could be a form, it could be an entire page, or it could be just like, the chat window. So you define your components. Component is ideally like a single piece of UI. And Angular is built with, Angular is made with components, modules, and services. So a module is nothing but which hosts both the component service into it. So if you want to talk about Angular architecture, how Angular applications look like, they have a component, they have the component taking care of all the especially like the UI logic, all of the business logic, that is like, what the app itself is, all of the business logic goes inside the service. And you have like, templates, basically templates being used as UI, a way to see your UI, they talk with the components. The component is binded to a template, and you see whatever like the UI logic is being handled. You see the data using templates, like the component, is taking care of rendering the UI and so on and so forth. So this was a quick recap. Now let's talk a little more about, observables. Reactive JavaScript, it's also like built with something called observables. So it's no longer like, we just mentioned asynchronous calls, right? One of the common example that you can think of an asynchronous call in JavaScript could be like, HTTP request, like an API call, for example. In JavaScript, you have like a promise as the response object type that gets returned. So it's like, you requested something and you got something back, and you got it as a promise, and once you got it, it's done. The story ends there. That's one API call. Whereas with observables, what happens, it's like an event stream. This gray box that you're seeing here, observables are nothing but like a stream of events. It's no longer like it's no longer like, okay, after you get one response it stops. No, with this you can continuously listen to the asynchronous call. You can say like, okay, this response, I first got the red marble and then the blue marble, and then the in terms of time, you can keep listening to it. And you can also have errors in the in just like promises, how promises have errors, observables can also have errors. And you define when you can stop listening. So this whole structure of an observable, which is part of the RxJS reactive programming ecosystem, is something we need to quickly recap on. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them in the chat. So this was a quick overview of what are the three, the main things that you need to know about Angular. So now let's get into the topic like slowly. We said we're going to talk about APIs, but what's an API? We said we want to talk about like the backend service, which our talk is about how all about communicating with backend services using Angular, right? So we said we want to talk about one kind of backend service, that's the API. So what's an API? API is like, if you want to define it, it's just like a piece of technology. In very simple words, it's like a technology that lets you talk with another technology. Or you can just think of, if you're ordering, this is a common example through which API is like explained to everyone. So if you're going to a hotel, you as the user are the one placing the order. The kitchen is the backend, whereas you're placing the order to the waiter, right? So the waiter is the interface, like between the restaurant and you. So between the kitchen and you. So he's the API. So the API, in order to just like summarize it in simple words, it allows you to talk. It allows you to talk to a particular piece of technology. And there's more to APIs. If this diagram, I think, beautifully sums it up. Like you in terms of, this is you, the client is you are going to the API is basically allowing you to talk to this particular piece of technology. That's the database. So this is a common use case where you build a web app, a front end, you make a API call, you're requesting some data, and then you get it back. We're going to discuss this a little more. So, when you just talk about talking, basically, talking has a language, right? It has like a specific rule. I'm saying these words and you're able to understand. There's like a format, basically. So there's a style to it. Language is like a style, right? So if just like that, APIs also have what you call as some methods, just like just like create, read, update, delete. These are like the HTTP methods that you can use with the API. So here, if I have to say, create is just like something which allows you to read, get information that already exists, for example, in the database. And post allows you to create something new. That's the create maps to like a post in terms of HTTP methods, whereas read is just like get. So all your database operations, the CRUD, are being translated as API methods here. So if you want to read from the database, you do a get. And then if you want to like modify something that's already existing, that's the update, you use something like a put method. And if you want to delete something that's existing, you use the delete method. So these are like the few basic things, like And one more thing to note here is like the REST API. You must have heard of this. Whenever you talk about APIs, the common term that pops up is like RESTful. What are these? These are nothing but architecture styles. Like these are like they allow interoperability between different types of apps. Like they provide a standard basically. So that's what the REST API here stands for. Let's look at more terminology, but with the help of a picture. So again, it's the same picture. Like you are the person with the web browser. You're the client here, and you're making a request with over the network. Use to the API, and the API is like now communicate, which is hosted on the web server somewhere, is talking to the database and getting you the response back to your browser. So all of this is happening in just like say click. You're ordering something, or you're chatting with someone. There are like several API calls in our day-to-day uses. So let's get to a little bit of terminology now. We said request response. What's a request and response? These are types of HTTP methods. Everything you do with an API surrounds making calls to that API. Like you have to call the API. So you have to request to get the data. You have to request to update the data. You have to request to delete the data. So that's what request means. And whereas response is nothing but like the reply that you get back. So the reply that you get from the reply that you get back from the API, that's the database itself, that's the response. Just like in our common language terms, it maps exactly to that. Let's look at more terminology. So there's more. Let's look at one at a time. Let's look at what's a JSON. JSON is think of JSON as a language that these two applications, your web browser, your web app and the database, they understand. Think of them as a language. So the request you do is maybe in a JSON language. The response you get is also like using JSON, like it's of type JSON. So since API does not really have like a user interface, you should be able to understand this, right? Like you should be able to understand the request and response. So in order to easily understand this, JSON is like both like a machine and a human readable language. Like it makes it easy for you to have the communication. For example, like the data flow, as you'd like to call it. So that's what JSON is, and more terminology here. So with also like all the HTTP methods we said, you'll also be seeing what's a header, what's a body. Like these are like additional information that you want to pass with one request. This request, for example, is like a get request, but I want to give more information. Instead of just saying get me this, I want to pass like get me this from that place in this time zone, for example. So these are all like additional informations which can be passed as headers in terms of a get request, whereas there's a body in terms of post and put request. These are just conventions like which are set by W3C and all of the consortiums. So yeah, and there are also like not everyone can use an API, right? So it's at times, because it's talking, it's allowing you to communicate between communicate with technology, especially like databases. So you have something like API keys, like which allow you for authentication and protecting your API and your data. So these are the terms that we've had to know. And before we get in, this is the exciting part. So we said we saw what Angular is with a quick recap, and we also saw what API is, and we covered some terminology. Now we're going to look at what's called as HTTP client. This is one of the modules. It's a simplified client which allows you to communicate with your API. So it's a module which Angular itself offers. You just have to import it and start using it. Since Angular is a framework, it comes with all of these toolings, like HTTP client. There's also like routing. There's so many other things, because it's a framework. It comes with all of these prepackaged. So using the HTTP client module, which is built on top of XML HTTP request interface that's exposed up by our browsers, we get to make these calls. Okay, I got a question saying, what is JSON? JSON is JavaScript object notation. It's just like, XML. XML and JSON are the two common data standards that you can use, for communication over the internet, which your web browsers, and which are like, which both the browsers, that is the computers, and you can understand. They're very readable in terms of, if you want to like understand something, it's very readable like that. So JSON and XML are the common data types. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the question. So, what are the advantages of using this HTTP module? This module is what Angular offers, and this is what we're going to discuss, how we're going to communicate with this API using Angular, right? So what are the advantages that this module gives us, this HTTP client module that Angular already has? The advantages are that it helps you create like a typed request and response. We just said that JavaScript has a lot of issues, right? With dynamic typing, with let and const being dynamically assigned. This makes it like, with Angular, especially like the HTTP client, you can assign, you can use TypeScript, and you can this makes your code more testable, and it makes it very what do you call, less prone to errors. Testing is just like a way to say that, okay, my app is this steady. If this kind of a response comes, it's a way of ensuring that your app doesn't break. So with this kind of the library that Angular gives, the module, HTTP client module, it makes like you can apply static types, and which to the request and response, which make it easily testable. And also the other advantage we have is that it's the HTTP interception. We're going to see more in detail about this. And the other advantage is the observable APIs, just like the one we saw already. So we said, like, this allows us to continuously listen and all that. This picture is here to remind you of what we discussed earlier. Yeah. So now let's discuss more about the Interceptor. But before that, I think it's a good point for us to now like just start implementing some stuff, or at least see an example of these methods: get, post, put, and delete, and how we can use HTTP client module to do this in Angular. Let's see a demo. So I'm going to use like an online compiler called StackBlitz. It's an online code editor. It's an online IDE. So if you just say stackblitz.com, let me type that out for you. If you just say stackblitz.com and you click on Angular, what this does is it sets up the Angular environment for you. It creates like some boilerplate code. It initializes, and it gives you like, with hot reloading, it gives you a platform to just start coding basically. So as you can see, this is like the component that we have already, and you see that it comes with app component already, and there's like a hello component. Now what we're going to do is implement get and a post request. And the API that we're going to call is called JSON placeholder. We said we need a REST API that we need to talk to, right? So we're not going to sit and implement an API, because that's not. We're just going to learn how you can connect with any API on the internet. We're going to use something called JSON placeholder. This is a free fake API for testing and prototyping. and you can read more about it at this website. So so that's how you initiate a stack blitz. And if you go here at Wafa Waheeda stackblitz.com, you'll see this particular stack blitz that I have. So you can basically just start using it. Okay. Um, okay, so this is where I am. What I want to share now is like how you can write this code. But let's I have the example already prepared, but let's look at it one by one. So what I have is the component, the same app component, and I have a few variables. Get data response, and posted data. So here what I'm doing is that I have a method called get data, which gets called, and it's talking to the JSON placeholder. So the way the JSON placeholder API. So the way you talk to APIs using the HTTP client module is by just doing http.get. It's as simple as that. But in order to be able to do that, so in order to be able to do that, you need to import the HTTP module in something called app.module.ts. So if you go this is like the bootstrapped place. Like this module, app module. If you recap about the architecture of Angular, you'll know that app module is what contains like everything. So this is like one place, like a root component of yours, root module of yours. So here, what you need to do is you need to import this client module, and basically, if you just call the data like this, it gets called. Yeah. So we're showing this data, this get data response. We made the call, right? http.get, and then we're subscribing. We're getting all of the information, and we're storing it inside the variable that we just created. So if you look at the HTML, what we're doing is we're just styling it in a better way and just showing it. So every time this component loads, we get this API call. So for example, if I say, so this is the post 10 for like this is a different post that this API returned. Now, like, how do you make a call which is this is get data, right? How do you make a call which is put, or sorry, post, if you want to make a post data? So here it's the same. You just do http.post. But remember we said post method takes a body. So this post is just gonna take like me and so me, and then you can say some body. Okay, and that's it. So once you click on this particular, let's also look at the console simultaneously. Let me know if it's visible for you guys. I can increase the size. Okay, so now if you click on add post, which calls this method, add post, the post data method. If I just simply click on this, you can see that this data is now being posted. We made an API call and we posted it. We added this particular record. Now let's look at the example of delete. So or maybe update, delete, update. So if you want to delete, you just say .delete, and you get like empty response from the JSON placeholder API. And if you want to update this particular post, Then you can say update above post, and in the console, because we're not updating the variable here, we're just printing everything to the console. So you get, I just got updated something new. Update also takes a body, just like post, basically. Yeah, so this was a quick demo of how to use the API itself. I want to quickly walk through the documentation so you can know how to do this by yourself. So Angular is really amazing in terms of documentation. If you just go to angular.io.guide/http, you should be able to like see most of what we discussed. Like in the first section, they just mentioned how you need to import the HTTP client module in order to make all of the things that we just discussed, like requesting data from the server. We saw, like, the HTTP get method. We saw a very simple example. It's to help you understand what the logic is, so you can look at this stuff and understand more. So this was about the HTTP methods, like how you can use them. If you have any questions, please go ahead and ask. Yeah. Now, like, we'll move on to the next topic of communicating with backend services, like HTTP client. We're still talking about HTTP client, and we said we're going to discuss like the three things, right? Like we saw how to give request and response. Now we're going to talk about HTTP interception itself. Like what's interception? I mean, what's an interceptor? And we're gonna implement our own interceptor now in just about a few minutes. So interceptor, like, just like how the name is used in our language, it is what it means. It's something that comes in between it. So basically we said API is like a technology which helps you talk to another technology, right? So imagine you are the Angular app, but there are many such cases where your app is requesting something, but you want to wait for something. You want to basically, maybe a common example is like the user logged in your app, but every time the user logs in and makes this API call, he has to send the API key, like we discussed. So some data has to, the request that the app makes has to be always, like, interrupted in order to maybe enhance the request more, or just handle it better, basically. So that kind of for those scenarios, we have interceptors, and the HTTP client module supports it. Like, with interception, you can declare these interceptors, and you can inspect and transform the HTTP requests like you want, from your application to the server. So just as just as you request, you can interrupt the request before it reaches the backend, and you can update it, or kind of like modify it, and then send it to the backend. So it's a very common and very well used technology, like interception in HTTP interceptors. So multiple, like, it's not just like one interceptor. You can have like a chain of interceptors. You can have like a forward and backward chain of requests. So the interceptors can perform like a variety of tasks. Authentication was just one example that I gave. Like, your user logs in, and with each request you have to send the API key. The request just goes in from the app, but how do you attach the key? So that key can be attached with interceptors. As soon as the API call is made, you can stop it, you can attach the API key, the token, and then send it. So this is one common use case. There's also another way where like, for every, it's basically a standard way for every HTTP request response. Without interceptors, like, without interceptors being implemented in this package, HTTP client, it would be very hard in this module. Like, it will be very hard for us, for Angular developers or any application developer, to make this ourselves. We'd be basically expanding it. So it's really a very good feature. very useful feature which comes in handy for development. So let's now look at an example of how we can implement this in real life, like I mean with code. So as you can see, this was our code with all the 4 API calls. Now, like to implement an interceptor, what the example that we are going to see is is going to let us like dig a little more deep into just the way the requests are made. So if you what I did was I right clicked here and said inspect. So what you see here underneath is like the developer console. So I'm using Chrome, and this is the Chrome developer tools. So this allows me to like do a lot of things, and I'm now on the network tab. So with the network tab, I can see requests or like any API calls that are being made. So I now with you want to see an API call in detail, like how it's made. So wait, yeah, I just cleared out everything. This 10 here is the same get request that we are making. So what did we say? We said earlier that in the constructor get the data. Anytime this app is being loaded, the constructor gets executed, and we're getting data. We're getting the data of the 10th user using the JSON placeholder API, of the JSON placeholder API. So here, if you look at this network tab thingy, and if you click on it, you can see you can see the request in detail. You can see that this was the request URL. By the way, this is the header. We're in the header section. So request method. Now, like in your brain, all the neurons should be firing. All of what we discussed is now like you're now seeing a real API call, which the browser just made, which your app made. So this was the header part. The request method we made was get. Yes, of course, get. And this was the request code. And if you look at the headers, there's like a bunch of things. But this is like the response headers, right? I want to look at the request headers, because what we said, interceptor is something that helps you stop the request, add more to it, and send it basically. So a normal a normal request header looks like this. You have a header, all of these things. So this is how a normal request header looks like. But do you see this particular thing? This is something I added. This is something we are gonna now do. We're gonna basically rename it and see. But we're gonna now see how was this request stopped and how was this extra header added. This is just an example, and we're gonna see more in detail how this was implemented. So the app component has nothing to do here, because we can also close it. So it starts by this file, http.interceptor.ts. So here what we're doing is we're having a class. We're creating like a custom post implement interceptor. And what all it does is that it clones the request that you're making, and it adds the extra header. Okay, so I just made the header more bigger. Hi, I was added. So this is the interceptor that we're setting the header. We are adding to the current request an extra header, an extra request header. So if you now see the example, let me clear it. Let me reload this. Oh, that's a lot of things. So this is the JSON response we got. And the interceptor, as soon as like the get data is being called, it's being intercept, and you get this. You get to add this interceptor. So the way this was implemented was it's used in common cases like authentication of the app or handling errors and so on. So here what we're doing specifically is this. We're just adding an extra header. And the way this was implemented is just like, I created a new file, http://interceptor.ts. And of course, anything that you create in Angular, you have to declare it like in the root module. Otherwise, Angular will not know about it. So all of the services, all of the API logic, everything should go under providers. And inside the provider, I just added like provide for HTTP, use this class. For any time there's like, I'm registering the interceptor and I'm calling this particular interceptor of mine here. So this is it. This is how you implement your own interceptor. And now let's look at more examples of okay, now we're going to look at what's error handling, and we're going to look at some examples of how you can do error handling with Angular APIs. I mean Angular with Angular HTTP client module. So error handling, of course, like nothing is perfect, right? I mean, especially if you're a programmer, you'd know that there's more like error scenarios that you want your app to be prepared for than the actual, like the real scenario. So errors always happen, and your API, like basically whenever you're implementing. Whenever you're integrating with an API, you should basically prepare for it. So you're making a GET request, but what if the server is not, like, the database does not have that person or the post that you're requesting for? So in such cases, you need to handle it in your code. And what Angular provides is a way for you to handle it as well. So the HTTP client module has error handling inbuilt, and you just have to use it for making your API calls like handle error gracefully. So error scenario, to just talk about it more in detail, it's like, you're making a request, but the data API does not exist. The API that you're calling to does not exist. So it responds with the error code saying that, okay, I'm not there, or there was no information found, or things like that. So that's when an error is raised. And how do you handle scenarios like this? Angular has like a lot of ways to do this. Even RXGS provides a way to handle errors. So if the request on the server fails, you can get the details. So basically, HTTP client captures all of its errors in something called HTTP error response. So it's as simple as, if you want to go back to the code that we are used to here, in the post request, in the GET request, if you want to error handle, so this is the data that's being returned, right? After the subscribe, inside the subscribe itself, what the HTTP client module allows you to do is to pass an error object like this. This is one of the ways of error handling. So anytime you get an error, like anytime this particular thing is missing, what you're saying here is throw an error into the console. That's what you're saying. But there are no errors in the JSON API, so we cannot see like a response for this. But this is how you handle errors. This is like the simplest form of error handling. In many cases, instead of printing to the console, you can also show it on the UI, or you can raise like an alert box. So there are different ways to going about error handling. So we saw like the HTTP response object, error object. You can do a lot of things with it. Also, like if you want to get the error details itself, the standard REST API protocol is that it returns the status code. If there's a status code of 400 or something, you can, or if there's no status, you can log the error in this case. Or if you want to retry a failed request, this is where the power of RxJS comes in, especially with since we said we're listening to a continuous stream of data. What we can do here is also we can pipe it, like using RxJS operators like retry. What we're doing here is like whenever we get like a failed response, or whenever we get like an error, try it for 3 more times, and only after that you can fail. So this power of, this is really incredibly powerful in terms of, any real use case. So for example, imagine you have this shopping application of yours, and you're building you've built this app. The user's trying to add a product to the cart, and immediately if your API is just showing him an error, it's not that graceful. Instead, like, with this power, I mean, with RxJS and with this retry operation, you're allowing him to retry more. Or even in terms of, like, just development, JavaScript, I would have to do like really complicated things to retry the API call, maybe have like a timeout, a timer, and all those complicated things. But with Angular and RxJS, I just have to say retry 3 times or how many ever times I want, and then fail, or and then give up. So this is incredibly powerful. And I'd really recommend you to go through this guide. So we saw what the interceptor is. We saw how to send all the data, and we also saw how you can handle errors. And we basically covered, like, how you can communicate with a backend service using Angular. We covered all of the use cases, and we saw, like, we played around with the JSON placeholder API. In case you want to, like, try with some other APIs, there's an amazing article which I'd recommend you to read. So this is the article. So like, there are a lot of open APIs that you can practice front-end development on. So the JSON placeholder API we saw is just the first one. There's many more, like fake store API, and there's many more. Unsplashed. So if you want to try with these APIs, all you have to do is just go to Startblitz, and you can either fork my project to start working with, or you can build your own. You just have to click on Angular after you click startblitz.com. And I think that is it from me. Yes. Okay. So this was about error handling. In case you have any questions, please do let me know. All right. So if you're interested to learn more about Angular, we have an upcoming session coming up. We have an upcoming session on 12th September from GDG Doha, where you can learn with the tech makers, learn with women tech makers. It's just like, a very comfortable setting where, there's one person who does not know Angular. She is learning from a person who knows Angular. So it's going to be like a very comfortable space where you can ask questions, you can code along. So this session is on 12th of September, Sunday, 6 to 8 p.m. In case you want to join in, I'll share the link in the chat as well. So let's build good things together. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And this is my Twitter handle. And I blog about Angular in case you want to follow me. Okay. Thank you so much.